Hi everyone. The musician I researched is Josquin des Prez. He was a representative composer in Renaissance period. It is not quite doubtless that Josquin was born in 1450 or 1455 in Flanders. Flanders is a territory of a duke, which includes present-day Belgium and northern France. Commonly, Josquin was identified as French. He made great contributions to the development of music in the 16th century and made a revolution in traditional music roles. His music combined some innovatory concepts with the existing principles. For example, he treated more equally to all voices and started to use chromaticism. He was a master in the polyphony because of his superb writing skills of imitation and canons. Besides, he had a clear relationship between music and text. His gorgeous music won him the favor of his sponsors and earned him a lifetime of fame. In what follows, I will introduce and interpret his childhood, traveling experience, relationship with sponsors, and music influences. It's a pity that there are little resources involved with his early life, and the most of clues are related to his works. In his childhood, he joined a choir ensemble with his friend at St. Quentin's Royal Church, approximately around 1460. Perhaps it was his childhood experience in the choir that made him so familiar with the choral works of the past that he wrote many of them. On top of it, he studied polyphony under Organ. Josquin respected him so much, and he wrote an eloquent motet to him when he was died in 1497. Not only was Josquin influenced by his teacher as well as his childhood in the choir, but also he was influenced by his patrons such as the Duke of Ferrara and Louis XIV. He composed pieces for them. Josquin spent his life traveling in many European cities such as Milan, Rome, Ferrara. Let me introduce his travel path briefly. He composed a lot of sacred and secular work there. He went to Italy in the second half of the 15th century, first as a singer in the Cathedral of Milan, then in the private church of the Duke Sforzas, where he spent nearly 30 years, more than 20 years. At the beginning of the 16th century, he went to work at the French court, and briefly returned to Italy to work as a church musician at the court of Ferrara. And then in 1504, he returned to the border of France and Belgium. Next, let's move on to his jobs. The first court he served was King Rene Angel. He worked for him from 1475 to 1480. And then in 1483, Josquin joined into the service of the Sforza family, where he was in the service of the Sforza from 1459 to 1479 or later. They were successful in obtaining the positions and honors for him and for other musicians in the ducal chapel. Okay, let's talk about his salary. In terms of the salary, it is not clear how much he was paid, but the salary should be generous because of the privileges of his office. In June of 1484, listed in a papal supplication as the commensal family of the new Cardinal Sforza, he obtained the rectory of the parish church of St. Aubin near Bourges and was granted permission to hold it without being ordained. During that time, he also worked for Louis XIV. Josquin wrote a motet for Louis, and in 1489, he moved to Rome as a member of the papal choir. It is worth to mention that Josquin carved his name into the wall of the Sistine Chapel. Josquin found his special musical language in Rome. He inspired by Italian secular music and refined his compositional skills of writing sacred music. He combined the essence of secular music and sacred music. Josquin was reappointed by Sforza in 1498, and in 1504, his import sponsor, the Duke of Ferrara, appointed him as a master of the chapel, and then, in the same year, he was appointed as a new canonic in the Church of Notre Dame. Like what I mentioned before, he was influenced by the Italian secular music and maybe French music, and he learned polyphony under his teacher Organ. Okay, let's pay attention to Josquin's revolution. However, Josquin made revolution to his situation because before him, many composers wrote pieces only for polyphony. Perhaps traveling around various countries and absorbing different musical styles influenced and inspired Josquin. His work is not a rigid pursuit for counterpoint or canon form. In Missa, the first Missa, the soprano was the main part, where the rest of the voices served as a relatively free contrapuntal lines. All of them like equal places, and all of them are beautiful melodies. Also, he has made great strides in the combination of text and music. For example, in the second clip, Ave Maria, he used points of imitation. Besides, to express the text better, Josquin composed alternating with polyphony and homophony and varied the texture constantly through the whole piece. On top of it, in Missa Pangelingua, a paraphrase mass, he adapted melody for polyphonic imitation rather than layering of voices around a cantus firmus. Let's listen a clip of the first Missa. In the recording, we can realize and hear each voice part is very beautiful. They are treated equally. Josquin was influenced by Italian secular music, and it is why I think he used homophony and paid attention to the text, whether he wrote secular music or sacred music. Like what I mentioned before, Josquin served kings and dukes of all nations. In this case, the leaders were not only satisfied aesthetically and spiritually, they were also reinforcing their power. It is because the church had an inseparable relationship with political rights. Among Josquin's patrons were many nobles. They got their way by commissioning Josquin to write for their political inclinations and by appointing him as a church and court executive like the master of a chapel. In short, Josquin was good at expressing words and emotions in music. His music style represents the general direction of the development of music in the Renaissance period, which is of great value to the study of the development of his music creation style. Thank you.